Hey, today we have Jeffrey Goldstein with Onward Global. Thanks for joining us, Jeff. How's it going?
Sure, good. Thank you so much.
So, give me a little bit of background on Onward Global. I'd love to hear how you got this company started, what was the genesis for it, and kind of like what made you take that leap.
Onward Global is, I've been China based for 11 years now. That's where I've really developed my career. I started Onward Global about 5 years ago. And essentially, Onward Global is an independent contracting practice where I help US startups, brands, and retailers manage and scale their sourcing, manufacturing, and ethical compliance, not only in China, but throughout Asia. I'm not an agent. I'm not a middleman. I'm really a contractor. So CEOs and COOs really consider me part of their team throughout our engagement, whether that's short term, midterm, and long term. And I work across a variety of different product categories, both consumer goods and industrial goods, and can really be hands on in all aspects of supply chain, product development, and procurement operations.
Got it. Thanks for the background. If you had to kind of give two or three reasons why you're different than a lot of the competition, because obviously importing and exporting from China is a huge space. What is it? What makes you different?
I really don't position myself to be a middleman. I think a lot of companies in the consulting or sourcing or supply chain space who are helping American brands and retailers and startups here in Asia, they introduce themselves to suppliers and other third parties as the third party, where everyone in the supply chain knows that headquarter or the US company is hiring this third party to represent them. The way I operate when I'm introducing myself on behalf of clients to all different parties, whether it's suppliers, logistics, or other parties, is I am part of their team. So everyone really sees me as a staff member representing and as a decision maker on behalf of headquarter.
So, you've been doing this for a while. How did you get started in this space?
I started my career on Capitol Hill and in consulting in the US after graduating from the University of Denver. And a big part of my responsibilities at the time with those companies was really engaging executives all over the world. And having been born in France myself, spending time in the Middle East throughout high school and college, studying abroad as an undergraduate student in China, I've really always felt quite international. And so there reached a point when I was working in the US in a cubicle, engaging all these executives all over the world, where I said, wait a minute, I don't want to be in a cubicle. I want to be one of those guys or one of those gals, out doing awesome things around the world. So the best opportunity that I identified at the time was to come out to Asia, to China, and to work with quite a large US sporting goods company servicing the mass market. And I was fortunate to be mentored and to work and scale myself up the operation to the point where after 6 years of working with the company, I oversaw about $35 million in procurement throughout Asia, overseeing a staff of 15 people, overseeing the management of about 35 factories in China, Vietnam, India, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. And so working for that company for about 6 years, overseeing sourcing and manufacturing operations really is where I got the experience, fell in love with the industry, fell in love with this career, and was inspired to then start my own business, Onward Global.
Very cool. So, when you made the move from the US to China, walk me through that. Like, what were your fears? How did you feel? Did you ever kind of question if it made sense to go all the way across the Pacific?
Well, it's funny, at the time in high school and college, I spent a little bit of time in the Middle East. And when it came time for study abroad, I remember going home and telling my father, hey, everyone's going to study abroad. They're going to surf in Australia. And my dad being like, oh, heck no. And I was like, all right, well, I've got some other friends that are going to Italy to learn how to cook. And my dad was like, definitely not. So we were kind of brainstorming like, all right, well, where can we go? And China obviously was the fastest emerging market, the biggest opportunity, what everyone was talking about. So I decided to come out to China. And I think the thing about China, whether you're a college student or a business executive and you come out here, people either very quickly fall in love with it, with the challenge of it, with the adventure of it, with the difference of it, or they very quickly realize, oh my God, get me out of here. And so I fell in love with it. I fell in love with, the politics, the history, the culture, and really the challenge of just being, a white boy in the wild, wild East.
So you worked for a company, you got some experience, and then you decided to start your own company. Walk me through that leap. So when you were like, okay, I'm going to go out on my own and figure this out and run my own business, what was that first year like? What were the ups and downs?
It was fate in a way. I mean, I'm so fortunate. My career with starting my business has only scaled up, and I just feel so fortunate with everything. And I'm thankful for it every day, and I'm sure to remind myself. But it was fate. When I left my old company, actually, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. And I knew I wanted to leave the company. I knew I wanted to do something new. And so I told myself, all right, for the next 6 months, I'm just going to network. And actually, at the time, I was thinking about changing industries. I wanted to maybe do something different. So I said, for the next 6 months, I'm going to move around to different cities throughout China and just network. I'm going to go try to meet people from Starbucks to Walmart to law firms to VC companies to accounting firms to small startups to e-commerce companies. And I'm just going to try to meet executives, learn about different industries, network. And, maybe I'm going to realize that I'm passionate about something, or maybe I'm going to meet the right person. And about halfway through that process, and by the way, the process I just defined, I highly recommend for anyone, in their early stage of their career, kind of just taking a risk, sometimes stepping back, realizing what you learned up to one point, and then saying, all right, maybe, I need to learn about a different industry or meet different types of people. But about halfway through that process, I had a few contacts in the US reach out to me and say, Jeff, you're in China right now. I know you're not working full time. I'm actually having a problem in my supply chain, and I need a man on the ground. So during that 6-month period that I was networking and trying to figure out my life, if you will, my quarter life crisis, I started taking on these small consulting projects, and I really became the man on the ground. And that inspired me to start Onward Global, realizing that, there are so many startups and brands in the US that either don't fully understand their operations out here in China, don't want to get on a plane and come out here to try to figure it out. Even when they do come out here and figure it out, they buy a plane ticket, they travel all over China, they don't really fully understand the culture or the supply chain or much, so they're kind of wasting money. This is an opportunity in itself. And so starting the company Onward Global kind of started organically and, out of faith. And today, that's kind of my slogan. I'm your man on the ground or in the air.
That's a great one. So you mentioned that the advice that you kind of gave to people listening would be to kind of explore opportunities and see what you like and what you don't like. Was there any advice given to you that has really helped you along your way?
Networking is just so important to everything everyone does, especially as a startup or as a company owner. And in today's world, networking is, I'm not going to say easy because everyone's different, but
right.
With the technology and the tools we have today, such as LinkedIn, you can reach out to anyone in the world. And it's interesting, the average person, they say, all right, I'm really interested in reaching out to company A. And the first person they think about is, God, wouldn't it be great if I could reach out to the CEO or the COO? I say, but no way, the COO is never going to respond to me. So I guess I'll reach out to a mid-level manager, or I guess I'll reach out to the HR manager. But 9 out of 10 people are thinking that way. And if you're the 1 out of 10 person, it's like, you know what? I'm going to take a chance and I'm going to try to reach out to the COO and ask the guy for a cup of coffee. You'd be surprised at how many positive replies you actually get. And, so I think that the piece of advice that I would give someone is, when you're networking, reach for the top and, keep trying.
Yeah, that's good. I think showing genuine interest in someone or their company is a really good way. And I agree, you got to shoot your shot. If you don't ask, you don't get, and you might as well start at the top because that can accelerate your learnings pretty quickly.
What I found is that senior people in their careers like to talk about themselves
Yep.
and like to talk about their experiences. And what I found is that when you approach an individual at a C level, as CEO, CFO, COO, and you're not necessarily asking for a job or anything. You're actually asking to learn from them, and you're saying, look, I'd really appreciate 15 minutes of your time just to learn about your career development and your experience. And I found that a lot of the time, if you position your request like that, they'll say, yeah, sure, good. Let's go have a cup of coffee. I'll tell you all about me. And then after they tell you all about them for 15 minutes, they say, oh, well, what about you? What are you doing? What are you interested in? What do you want? And that kind of opens up those doors and that networking in a much more, natural and genuine way.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it just goes back to showing interest and kind of not putting them on a pedestal, but making it sure that you are explaining that you're really interested in their career. And if you can cite something maybe from their LinkedIn or Twitter profile or find a news article, that can really help you kind of cut through the noise. They do get messages, but most people are just kind of sending templated stuff to them. So that's great advice. So tell me more about the supply chain issues in China. We know with the last year, things have been kind of crazy and the e-commerce space is exploding. What do people who are in the US not know about what's going on right now with supply chain issues in China?
China is such a large, dynamic, diverse, and fast changing country that the situation on the ground here can literally differ on a day-to-day basis. So I mean, where to start, right? I think if you're a small company owner or an emerging, or fast-growing e-commerce company, I think it's hard at the beginning, and this includes some of the clients I've worked with. It's hard at the beginning to allocate money towards coming out here and trying to figure out your supply chain. You meet a few what you think are factories or trading companies on the internet. You say, all right, the samples look good. The first 500 units shipped pretty well. We feel good about things. But as you start growing your business, a factory or a company that maybe made 500 units very well may not be able to make 2,500 units. A factory that's financially stable today may not be financially stable tomorrow. So personal relationship management and really being able to verify who you're working with out here is just so important. Things are really changing on the ground here every day. So even though clients hire me to be their man on the ground, one of the first things I tell them is, look, even if I'm your man on the ground, at some point you got to get your butt over to China to really know who you're working with, where your production's happening. Are you happy with it? And if not, we obviously need to develop a plan to change that or to scale that to make sure it's going to meet your needs in 6 to 12 months as your company grows. China really continues to be the wild, wild east. Everything from our cultural business practices, how we define good and bad, black and white, what the gray zone is just so different in the US and China that it's so easy for challenges and issues to arise if you're not really hands-on in managing your operation.
So it sounds like one of the things that you can really help with is you can help companies avoid a lot of like amateur mistakes that you would make if you didn't know what you were doing coming into China, which could obviously cost you a lot of time and a lot of money. But also you have a Rolodex, or who to work with, and that helps to kind of accelerate their process of working with China. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I just wanted to kind of clarify that a little bit. And then going back to the supply chain issues, one thing that I'm aware of is that costs have increased. Can you give me some examples of like how things price-wise have changed? Because there's a lot of talk about inflation and then supply constraints in the US. I think it would be interesting not only for consumers, but business owners to know, what have you seen on the ground as far as pricing and why there is a huge increase?
Well, there's a few things that has happened in the last year. I mean, obviously the purchase of personal protective equipment has created such a vast amount of production here in China and a need around the world that there's so much shipping going on that there's a lack of containers available. So with so many containers leaving China and so much demand for these containers, and so little of the containers actually returning to China, because the global economy is still kind of on pause right now. And I don't have the number in front of me, but the number of containers that actually, even pre-COVID, come back to China is very, very little. So there's always a shortage of containers here in China. And so right now, with the increased demand and with the global economy starting to pick up, everyone's fighting for containers. Whereas a container, shipping from Shanghai to Los Angeles maybe 3 years ago costs about $2,500 to $3,000. Right now can be between $9,000 to $12,000.
Wow.
So if you're an e-commerce company or a small startup, that's really digging into your cash flow and your financial management. The other thing is, in terms of raw material costing, because the global economy is now starting to pick up and production is starting to pick up. And also, it's interesting because the global economy is still on pause. So a lot of the manufacturers in Turkey, South America, even in the US, have not been able to produce what the consumers need. So a lot of middlemen and trading companies have turned to China to manufacture. So there's even higher demand in China. And the cost of raw materials like plastics and metals have just gone up significantly the last few months, which obviously is going to impact, the pricing of product as well. So again, as a small startup owner or an e-commerce purchaser, if you don't have strong contracts in place or strong relations with your suppliers to really help manage that consistency and sustainability in your pricing, you're going to find, a lot of challenges in being able to meet the needs of your consumers and your procurement operations.
And then, so price has gone up. How does lead time look now? Has that changed?
Lead time has absolutely changed as well. Again, it really depends on product, region, but I could tell you, for something like apparel or bags or shoes, usually you're looking, pre-COVID at a 60, 75, 90 day time frame from the time you place a PO to your shipment leaving China. Today, it's closer to 75 to 90 to 120 days.
Oh, wow.
So you definitely need to be planning for that. The other thing that's happened in China, minimum wage prices have gone up in China and continue to rise quite large. And so it's getting more and more expensive for factories to have, a large labor force. So what's happened is the size of the factories actually has reduced. And whereas, you may have a factory who 5-6 years ago maybe had 200 or 300 or 400 sewers, today that factory probably just has 75 to 155 sewers.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Because it's so expensive to manage all that staff. And so production capacity is smaller in that factory, which obviously impacts your lead times. But it not only impacts that, but when a buyer places a very large order, they don't have enough space in their factory. So many times they have to use sub-factories. And when they're using sub-factories, most of the time, they're certainly not telling the buyer.
Okay. That's another good insight.
And so when they're using sub-factories, that really becomes, one, an ethical issue. What kind of sub-factories are they using? But two, it can also create quality issues, because if they don't have a good quality management system, the quality at their main factory versus the sub-factories that they're using may all be different. And that means the product quality consistency that you're getting may be different as well. So again, it's really important to just have a good relationship with your supplier. Come out here to China to really oversee as much as you can when you can, or to have, a man on the ground who can do that on your behalf.
So you mentioned going out to China. What do you think would be the minimum amount of time that you'd have to dedicate to get things started? And I know that's probably a tough question, but maybe, just ballpark it so people have a understanding if they're looking to start a new brand.
With the internet today, I think you can do a pretty good job of identifying suppliers online, and at least starting that relationship of getting company profiles, getting quotations, getting samples. And I think that's probably what most, small e-commerce brands do. In my experience, most e-commerce companies don't actually come out to China until well after they place their first, $200,000, and they start making enough money to actually purchase a flight out here.
Do you think that they should be coming out before to connect with the suppliers before they make that 200,000?
I think it really depends on how technical and how sophisticated of a product it is, and what kind of quality you're looking to meet. If it's a very technical product that really requires, your own designers and engineers getting involved, maybe it's worth flying them out here to work closely with the factory. If it's a very high price product where your risk is going to be even higher, if you're placing, a 2,000 or 5,000 unit order and you have the cash to come out here and do it, I would certainly advise coming out here. I mean, I would not come out here before you even start the process, because if you just hop on a flight out here and you're like, all right, now I'm going to stay at the Sheraton hotel for a week as I try to figure it out, I mean, that's going to cost you $2,000 right there, right? So I would certainly start that process in the US, try to identify 3 or 4 vendors, and then come out here and go vet those vendors. Sourcing is like sales in many ways. You've got to throw your net out. And, for every 100 prospective, clients that you may find, out of those, maybe only 50 are going to even reply to your email. Out of those 50, only 25 are going to be actually interested in meeting. Out of those 25, only 10 are actually going to show up. Out of those 10, and the numbers just trickle down. And sourcing is the same thing. For every one good factory that you're going to identify, and what I mean by good factory is really a long-term good manufacturing partner. You've got to throw the net out there, and it may take you going to visit or going to work through 2 or 3 different factories to find that supplier.
Oh, wow.
The other thing is, when you're identifying suppliers, there's a lot of trading companies in China. There's a lot of factories. There's a lot of factories who make shoes, but will tell you that they make pillows, but they're really not. They're making it at their uncle's pillow factory or at a sub factory, or they're not even in that business, but they just got a random call from a guy in the US saying, hey, can you make this? And they say, sure, I can make it.
How do you avoid that, or how do you notice that?
It's hard. You've got to hire someone or come out here yourself. Really, I hate to say there's no other way, but I mean, anyone who's done business in China will tell you that if you're not verifying who you're working with and where you're working and how you're working, at some point you're going to get burned.
Right. Yeah. It seems like that's,
everyone knows that when you receive a beautiful company profile from a factory or from a trading company, more than half the time it's just too good to be true.
Yeah. No, that's good to know. I mean, there's a lot of great insights for people who are getting started and then people who've been in the industry for a while. So I only have a few more questions. What's your 1-year goal and your 3-year goal for your business?
So I've recently, with COVID, it's interesting. With COVID, while I have not been able to travel to different countries, obviously US companies, every COO in America and Europe right now is thinking, all right, what's our 1, 3, 5, 10-year goal? And what's happening with China right now? Are these political tensions going to continue to increase? So companies are looking to minimize their risk. They're looking to learn about different supply chain markets, and they're looking to diversify. And so one thing I've started to do is I've started to build an infrastructure in terms of staff and network in different countries. That includes Vietnam, Cambodia, India, and Bangladesh. And all countries that I've worked in and manufactured in before, but I'm really now starting to invest in building out teams and infrastructures there. And so that's probably where I'm going to continue to focus on for the next year and 3 years, really formalizing my service offerings in those markets and countries, as opposed to primarily being China-based.
Very cool. And then as far as business books, do you read any? Do you have any that you would recommend, or any books in general?
That's a good question. I'm really not the kind of guy that reads Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or Tim Cook kind of books. I'm kind of a geopolitical and history guy. So I'm not too sure the interest for your viewers, but there's obviously a lot out there. And
Okay, fair enough. And then as far as tools that you use in your day-to-day, is there any software that you love? Anything that you would recommend?
I'm a simple email and Excel and Word kind of guy. I think that's, I think for these large multinational corporations, I know that they're investing and using different types of tools, but for the kind of work that I'm doing and the kind of clients I work with, we're keeping it pretty simple, which has been the most efficient and effective.
Got it. And then last question, how can people connect with you if they wanted to chat with you or do business with you?
Sure, I appreciate it. My website is onwardglobal.com, and the easiest way to reach out to me is on the website in the contact page. There's an easy way to write me a message, or people can contact me at Jeffrey, Jeffrey, at onwardglobal.com.
Great. Thanks, Jeff.
Sure, Joe. Thanks a lot.